got called as the gospel doctrine teacher in our ward, in the student ward, and so I was teaching the gospel doctrine. And there's this little gal, 5 foot tall, and a bundle of energy, come up every Sunday after the lesson and had 2 or 3, 4 questions. How about this? How about this? How about this? That was Rebecca Stark. And finally, the questions got so involved. I says, "Well, look, let's just meet at Deseret Towers, and we'll spend some time with some of these questions." And so, turns out that her mother had joined the church when she was like 3 years old, and then her mother passed away when she was 14. And at that point, she was mad at God. She left the church, and she was involved. She was a cheerleader and with the football crowd and the popular kids and all of that. And she had a party at her home when her parents were gone. They drank part of his liquor. Her parents were, her dad wasn't a member of the church. Her mom had been, but she had passed away. And so she kind of cleaned up before her dad got home, added water to the liquor bottles to bring them back up to the right thing. And she says, "I don't want this life. I don't want it." And he says, and so she was graduating from high school, and he says, "Where do you want to go?" And she says, "I want to go to BYU." And he says, "You can go anywhere you want. Do you want to go to Utah, BYU?" And she says, "That's where I want to go." So he gets her, he had money. So he gets her in his plane, and he flies up to Provo, Utah. Brings her up to BYU, gets her settled in, and so that's her. And she knows that she's a member of the church. She was baptized. That's about all she knows about the church. So she was hungry for the gospel. And anything I said was new territory for her. And so we started getting together, and I asked her on a date. It was Ron and I are going to hike up the canyon, and so do you want to go with us? That was kind of the date. So me and my buddy and we can hike up the hill. And so that day it rained, and it was a hard rain there in Provo. And so I went back to Rebecca and I says, "Look, we're not going to go for a hike. We're going to just go up to my parents' house." And she says, "Okay." And I thought, okay, all right. So anyway, Ron and I and Rebecca go up, and so we spent the afternoon with my parents. And as we're leaving, my mom catches me. They're going out to the car, and she catches me at the door, and she says, "Who is this girl? I like her." And I said, "Mom, it's really a first date." And she says, "Oh, I like her." And I said, "Okay." And so we dated. Then summer school, I worked in the mountains and then in building houses and doing those kinds of things. And she went to summer school. The way I asked her to marry her, we were up in the mountains, we're hiking, and we were just sitting there in the shade. And I looked at her and I says, "If I ask you to marry me, would you?" And she says, "Yes, I would." And I says, "Then would you?" So that was very, very unromantic. I married Rebecca Stark on January 20th, 1968. We were married in the Salt Lake Temple. Her parents, her dad and stepmom were not members of the church. And so all the time that we were doing the prep work in the temple, my dad spent with Bob and Mary Jo Stark touring the temple grounds and that. And then Dad came in for the sealing ceremony. She graduated in child development, and early child development and elementary education. And Rebecca was a master teacher. She was incredible in what she could do with kids and keeping their attention and that. And she taught for a while before I graduated. The school system came and asked for a recommendation, and they says, well, Rebecca Crowther, and they put her right into the Provo school system, into kindergarten. There was a gal that was needing back surgery, and so Rebecca finished the school year for her, and but then she substituted a lot. And then she had her own preschool. She ran her own preschool for a while. She homeschooled the kids. How that got started was my youngest son, Evan, was having trouble in second grade reading, and Rebecca was a school mom. She'd come in and help, and she noticed that, and she says, switched over to homeschooling. And then Jenna says, I want to homeschool. And Tasha says, I want to homeschool. And Cyril says, I want to homeschool. So now we had all of these kids in homeschooling. And Rebecca was the teacher. And like I said, she was a master teacher. And she was accelerating them all through their grades. And Evan wanted to go back to school in his 5th grade. And when he went back in, he was ahead of all of his classmates because of the work that Rebecca had been doing with them. Camille was born. She was another Army. Interesting. We were at a company social, and Rebecca was pregnant, and our doctor was just right over there across the table from us. And Rebecca goes into labor, and I says, Doc, Rebecca's into labor. And he says, okay, I'll meet you over to the hospital in an hour. He says, I need to go change. And so we went and we changed, and we went over, and Camille was born there at the Fitzsimmons General Hospital. This is about a month before we got out. Interesting, she, as a baby, she was crying, just screaming, just uncomfortable. And we take her to the hospital there, and they checked her, and they says, well, her brain is growing and her head is fused. The top of her head, it's no soft spot. It's already connected. And I says, okay, what do we do? I mean, we're discharging from the Army in a month. And they says, well, as soon as you get to where you're going, it's going back to Anaheim, California. He says, get her in to a neurologist, because we have to have this operation. We separate the and put slides in there so the brain can expand and grow and I'll do all this stuff. And so we're getting out of the Army, and no insurance. I mean, the Army's insurance is stopping. Didn't know what to do. So anyway, we stop in Utah with my parents, and Victor and my dad and myself, we gave Camille a blessing and priesthood blessing. And then we get to Anaheim, California, and we take her into the neurologist, and the neurologist checks her out and says, she's fine. It's not a problem. Yeah, David was born in California. He's the third. And he was our teddy bear. In other words, he was just the happiest, easiest kid until he wasn't. And when he pitched a fit, he would lay on the floor and he would kick and scream. And we didn't reward bad behavior, so we'd just step over him and go on about our business. And when he finally got over whatever he was doing, then we'd pick him up and love him. But that was David. They placed me with Harleco as a chemist. They come in, they're looking for people to go back to New Jersey. And so I interviewed for the job, and they hired me to come back to be a purchasing agent for chemicals. I said, okay. And so moved the family back to New Jersey. And so the plant is in Gibbstown. I'm living in Williamstown. And we bought, well, we were going to buy a home, but it had all kinds of liens on it. And so we says, okay, we're not going to do that. And then we were stuck for a place to live. And one of the members of the ward had a home that was sitting vacant there on their farm. He says, we're not interested in selling it, but if you'd like to live there, there's nobody there right now. And so we moved the family into the home. It hadn't been lived in for a number of years. And we get the 3 kids, because David had been born. Jenna was not born yet. So you get Nathan, Camille, and David into bed, and we go in to lay down. I had a mattress on the floor. And in the middle of the night, Rebecca wakes me up, and she says, I was just attacked. And I says, what? I was just attacked. It tried to choke me, and I cast them out. I says, you cast them out? And she says, yes, I raised my hand, and in the name of Jesus Christ, I commanded him to leave. I says, okay. So we get up, and we get the family together in the middle of the night, and in the name of Jesus Christ and by the priesthood, we cleansed the home. And we could feel a lifting. Just there was the home had been vacant, and I don't know what had gone on in before, but we were not welcome to be there. And so anyway, we didn't have any problems with that anymore. And within it was about 2 or 3 months later, we found the home in Williamstown. We moved over into Williamstown. We're in Aurora, Colorado, and my father-in-law calls me and says, Jay, my wife, he'd remarried. Rebecca's mother had passed away, so she was feeling pretty depressed, and he says, well, why don't we just go to Europe for 6 months or something? And she popped and got a hold of this idea and says, okay, let's go to Europe. And he says, oh no, what have I done? So he says, I put my house up for sale, and I added $100,000 to the price of the home. He says, that should ice up for a few years. He lived in California, Oceanside, California. 2 weeks later, the home had sold for the increased premium, full price. And he called in. He says, I've got a problem. He says, Robin is still in school, and this is Rebecca's younger sister. And I've made this promise, and so I guess we're going to Europe, and I can't take Robin with me. And I says, that's fine. I says, we'll take her. And he said, will you? And I said, sure. And he says, she doesn't have a lot of discipline. I says, that's fine. And so she shows up with her boyfriend in Colorado, and and he's helping her move in. And so we get the boyfriend headed back to California. And I says, okay, Robin, we have 2 rules. You have to come for family night. We do family night on Monday nights. You have to be there for family night. And the other rule is you have to wake me up when you come home. I mean, and she was 16 years old. Still in high school. And so that was interesting because Nathan was just like 1 year old, so we'd have very simple family nights, all geared towards Nathan. He's my oldest son. And so Robin was caught in this very basic gospel, 2-year-old, 1-year-old family nights. And then she would be out with her friends, and she'd come home, and she'd wake me up, and it would be, I'm home. And I said, fine. Are you all right? I'm fine. And I said, okay, good night. And then she would come home, and then she would start talking to me, tell me kind of what she did for 5 minutes. And then she'd go to bed. And then in 10 minutes, she'd come in and she'd talk. And then she'd sit on the bed, and the edge of the bed, I've got to go to work the next day. But anyway, we'd talk. And she would kind of tell her what she'd done and what her night had been like and who her friends were. And so that was kind of cool. And then it got into a half an hour and an hour talks after her thing. And so we would spend that time together. And then she wanted to know if she could come to church with us. And I says, oh, yes. Well, the first time that she came to church, I was a teacher's quorum advisor. And as she comes in, and she has the California miniskirt on, the first time into church. And my quorum, my teacher's quorum, was, I mean, they had all kinds of questions about this girl that would come in and sit with us, because she was pure Californian when she came in. And so anyway, I talked to her, and we got more appropriate clothes for church, and then she started coming to church, and then she wanted to be with the kids in Mutual, and she got involved in Mutual. And by the time her dad and her stepmom got back, she was in full involvement with the church and the church people. Her stepmother was Presbyterian, and she wanted nothing to do with the Mormons, and she didn't want Robin to do anything with the Mormons, and she was upset with all of this involvement with the church. Well, they took her back to California, and she got involved with the kids there, and she eventually wound up coming to BYU. She met her husband there, got married in the temple. She has passed away some years ago, but good girl. Robin was her name. Rebecca gets a call from her cousin. It says, "What are we going to do about Aunt Bibi?" And Rebecca says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, she's in a home, and we don't know what we're going to do." And Rebecca says, "Well, we'll take her." I mean, Rebecca was just that way. "We'll take care of that." And her cousin says, "Okay." And so we go out to California, and she was in this home, and she was in tough shape. She was in bed, and I thought, well, this gal, Aunt Bibi, she's only going to last a few months, and not much more. And so we closed down her home. She had a live-in boyfriend, and he was not happy about losing Bibi, but we got her back up into Fruit Heights with us. And she got around the grandkids. And the new babies coming in, Evan and Sorrel were getting born, and Tasha was just a little scamp. And it's amazing when you get family around. Her health returned. She just boop, 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 boop. And she lived with us for 12 years. And I handled her estates for her and stuff like that. And she was always after me, Jay, what are you doing with my money? And so we'd have to go through and account all of her stuff, where it was. And so that was fun. And then we moved down to Salem, and she came with us. She actually passed away here in Salem.